Thank you for coming. Welcome to this session on workforce and culture. So I think if I did a sort of a hands-up process of most of the people in the room, and I asked you if workforce was keeping you awake at night and was one of your issues or your company's issues, I don't know, perhaps you could raise your hands if it is in the top three of your issues. It's good to know, Julian, that that's it. So I mean, it's no secret. It's been spoken about at length at every session we've done so far. It will be spoken about at every session we do tomorrow as well. So today, I have a panel of three expert women who will take us through their journeys, their thoughts, and their experiences over the last couple of years, how they've worked on building culture programs into the heart of their organizations, how they're looking after their staff, looking after their employees, and most importantly, how they're looking to increase that and build talent pipelines and build education programs to attract more workforce to the sector. So I'll start on my left. So joining us from Switzerland is Samantha Laurent. Hi, Samantha. So Samantha Laurent, she spent the last 7 years in Unilabs, completely sort of overhauling and revolutionizing their culture with their Care Big program. Unilabs, probably most of you know, but they are, and Samantha, or Sammy in particular, is responsible for nearly 13,000 employees across 200 labs and 180 imaging centers in 14 countries in Europe and in the UAE and Peru. Sophie Boissard, the CEO of Korian. Hi, Sophie. Good to see you on digitally instead of here yesterday. So I'm glad you made it back to Paris safely. So Sophie Boissard is the CEO of French elderly care giant Korian. She's responsible for nearly 60,000 employees across 1,000 facilities in France, Germany, Italy, UK, Belgium, Spain, the Netherlands. She also has a target of tripling the number of nurses that Korian trains annually to 6,000. And so welcome, Sophie, thank you. And with me in the room today is Kirsty Bashforth. Kirsty is the Chief People and Communications Officer at Global Renal Care Group Diavirum. You're responsible for 14,000 people.
Yep.
Is that right? These numbers are all good. In 450 clinics across 24 countries. So I think you've got the most countries to deal with. Yeah? The biggest challenge.
The country prize.
And prior to joining Diavirum in 2020, you spent sort of 24 years at BP.
I did.
And in 2019, you literally wrote the book on culture.
I did.
So we've got an expert on culture in the room with us as well today. So welcome. So I think to kick things off, sorry if I keep playing with my ear. To kick things off, I think the past 18 months have been particularly difficult. Moving forward, they're looking a little bit uncertain still. There's lots and lots still to deal with. So I thought to sort of kick things off, it'd be quite interesting to get everybody's perspective of exactly what those issues have been. And there's been this weird sort of, in healthcare services, obviously you've had people in sort of the front line, people who are very much sort of on the front line of everything, and then you've had cultures and people in your business to deal with who are working in sort of clinical, sort of perhaps safer spaces. So I was interested to know kind of what this impact has been and what the impact of the pandemic generally has been on your organizational culture and the lessons that you've learned. So Kirsty, perhaps I'll start with you on that one.
Well, there's lots to share. I mean, the first thing I'd say is our clinical staff, who make up the vast majority of our organization, obviously had some extreme measures that we needed to put in place, and we went into those in January 2020 with our contingency plan to make sure our patients and staff were safe, and therefore if your staff are also safe, your patients feel safer. And then we went into a vaccination phase more recently towards the start of this year where we're now up to over 72% of our patients worldwide double vaccinated and some even triple vaccinated, over 90% of our staff. But the coming out is a very different set of paces for those staff, because not all countries, as we know, have the same levels of vaccination. So it's not as if everybody's coming out at the same pace and at the same level. So there's different measures for clinical staff versus office staff. We also had sort of contingency plans for office staff working from home by default. We're now bringing that back to not by default. But again, different paces in different countries. So we've got different paces and different measures for clinical staff versus office staff. And we've also got probably some of the more acute situations that our clinical staff were working in versus our office staff who were relatively safe sitting at home. So there's a challenge there to have different measures, different paces, different things coming out. I think it was almost clearer going into the pandemic about what everybody needed to do. Coming out is way more challenging, way more bumpy, because it's very complex. Not every situation is the same. So we had to spend quite a lot of time ensuring that our clinical staff were really supported, really felt safe, had excellent well-being practices, but also paying mind to our office-based staff who were at home and are now probably looking at the more chronic, longer-term, how do I come back to the office? Do I want to come back to the office? Are they tired? So there's acute and chronic, different paces, different measures. It's been active management, shall we say.
A difficult first couple of years on the job.
Challenging.
Challenging,
Yes.
yeah.
I come from the oil industry, though, so that's used to being difficult as well.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Used to a good few crises.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I won't mention those. We'll not talk, not least the sort of the current energy crises that are going on,
Absolutely.
actually. But that's
Absolutely.
a topic for a different conference, I think. Sammy, how's your sort of last couple of years been? How have you found that sort of the culture development? How's your Care Big program sort of helped, or what's it been like at Unilabs?
So I think Care Big was always and is always about putting the front line at the heart and start of what we do in Unilabs. And of course, as Kirsty said, our first concern was keeping the workforce safe and caring about each other. I wanted to highlight the change in the leadership. I think that with remote working and having a two-stream flow of people at the front line and people then working from home, it changed our leadership into a much more humble and much more agile team as well. I think that you need to make sure that you reach out to people and take those everyday Care Big gestures into account. So how are people doing? Checking in with them, having those local conversations. And I think that the remote working, using Teams, using virtual working really helped to do that. And we have a very, very strong culture, and we see our leaders as caregivers as much as they give care for our patients, as much as they give care for our customers. They need to be able to start by giving care to one another. And I think that gives way to less superfluous items, and probably you go more into the very factual and the very strict consensus of leadership. And there was a very big pendulum swing with us with COVID. The first months were about keeping safe as people and keeping safe as a business. So looking at, operations were being replanned, hospitals were unsure of where this was going to go. And then suddenly coping with a very increased demand for PCR testing, for COVID testing, and learning as a business to really adapt on a basically day-to-day basis as to what we were able and needing to do. And I think that around 40% of people now don't want to go back to the new normal. They don't want to go back to the sort of what is the normal way of working every day in the office. So we're going, as Kirsty said, coming out of this is also going to be a challenge, because we're discovering together, our frontline people and also our leaders and our people working from home, what is this new normal actually going to mean for all of us. And I think that we're learning what the acceleration of digital is actually going to mean for our Care Big culture, and what it's actually going to mean for us as a business. And that term proximity becomes about connecting on very different levels and not purely physical connection in physical meeting. All of that puts a different emphasis on how we work together, and it actually helped us create proximity. You have a virtual coffee break with somebody at the other end of the world, and it's no longer seen as a plan B. Connecting with them via Teams is seen as the way of doing things now, and I think that actually has helped us in some way.
That's an interesting comment. I was talking to somebody just a few minutes ago, because obviously this is sort of the first time a lot of us have been together. Some of us maybe in the last few weeks have seen each other in person, started going back to the office. And one of the things that people say is, somebody said to me outside, is it's great because you run around and you see somebody and then you've done that, and then you don't feel as awkward on Teams when you talk to them anymore because you've actually met them physically. And I think in team working structures, people that haven't seen each other and met each other for a long time, it's quite an important sort of ability to be able to do that. It's quite a nice benefit, really, to be able to have that flexibility. I pick up on a point, actually, that I just wanted to bring on to, but Sophie, I just wanted to get your experience and to the same question as to how your culture has been impacted over the last couple of years. You're obviously in a slightly different setting with, in care homes and things that have been completely highlighted by a lot of issues, particularly during the first and the second wave. I mean, what's your cultural journey been like over the last couple of years?
Yeah, actually, the last 18 months have been very, very intense and sometimes also very challenging. If I try to summarize what actually those 18 months brought to the company, I would say first an immense, from my side and from the leadership side, immense gratefulness for the care workers that were there, ensured care continuity, especially during the first wave, first lockdown. It was really something unexpected and probably unheard at this level. And the way everyone was there, no one missing, and support function being transformed into helpers and going on site to support, to provide procurement, PPE, whatever stuff was needed and required, was for me really probably something that I will never forget, and that I will be immensely grateful until I die, I would say, for. It was really really extreme, and the way they did it is I'm very proud of what they did, actually, and this is what I'm saying is actually true for all the leaders in the organization. So first is gratefulness, and this is now very, very strong in the company's culture. I will explain. The second major one, is alignment. Actually, as a care company dedicated to elderly and fragile people support, we are very multi-local. We are present in across Western Europe in 7 countries, 1,000 locations, facility, care networks. So very much multi-local. And until COVID, the say was, here is different. It's different in the north of Netherlands. It's different in the south of France. So we are doing quite the same thing. Purpose is the same, but the way we are doing it is very different, and you cannot understand. The culture is different. And with the COVID, actually, all the facilities had to face exactly the same unknown at the same time. Yes, as Kirsty was explaining, regulation and guidelines from the local authorities were sometimes different. But actually, as a company, we decided to tackle that challenge with the best knowledge and to constantly improve and change and adapt procedures, taking actually the best possible option, because we were in a position where we could see what happened in Italy to start with, and then in Spain, and how it expanded to France. Germany was more protected. So we could actually prevent and prepare the whole network with the best possible knowledge every time. And it has created a very, very strong alignment internally on quality, on procurement, on the key standards. And it has actually accelerated the streamlining and alignment on same standard and measures. So I would say we are more than ever a European company than we used to be before COVID. And it was really my aim to have that journey. But I would have bet, we will need 5 years to be there. And we had to be there within a couple of months. And we won't ever get out of this, because actually everyone realized how powerful and how helpful it has been to have that knowledge and that strong alignment and strong support within the company. And last but not least, the third lesson is definitely about new way of working. Just to say, for example, digital, remote learning, remote training, remote onboarding. Even if referring to my case, I have now a virtual breakfast with a couple of people across Europe on a regular basis every 2 weeks. And I would never have dared doing such things before the crisis, you know. And now it's really part of the daily life. So I would say the connection and the connectivity has become very different from what it used to be. So we were a very low-tech type of activity, and we are still. But at least the enabler to communicate with family, with relatives, with authorities, now it's really part of the daily routine, and it has accelerated a lot. So these are the three main game changers coming from the crisis. And actually, after the first wave, so it was last summer, 2020, we decided to have a wider tour within the organization just to let people talk and explain what they had to go through. We had also we asked also external journalists to have a movie just to take the testimonies and all the says about what we had to go through. And based on that materials, I decided to fully reshuffle and redraft the company's values and purpose. And we came with, to the multiple contribution and testimonies, we decided that what we learned through the crisis was actually that the core values in our activity is about trust. The trust together, the trust with the families, trust with the authorities, the trust we give and we are given. It's about initiative, and we had to demonstrate how much initiative matters in such a situation because none of this was pre-written. And it's about responsibility because at the end of the day, we are all responsible for elderly and fragile people and for their beloved ones. And this is about responsibility and transparency and always goes with that. And I would say we are not the same as the one we were before the crisis. And this crisis has changes in some extent, improve us because we had to be confronted to something. I would say the ultimate challenge and crisis, unfortunately. So that's what I would like to share with you.
Yeah, can I just build on something that Sami said and also Sophie said, that it may seem counterintuitive, but I think in this sort of situation, cultures can be strengthened, not necessarily weakened just because we're all on digital. And both of you have mentioned the sort of, the focused leadership has been bounced into. A lot of leadership was there already, particularly in this sector, but really listening to the front line, not turning up and saying, I'll come and visit your clinic, but actually, is it appropriate? Is it not? Do you want help? Do you not? So flipping actually who's in charge of the focus, which is great, long may that stay. But the second thing is, and Sophie, you mentioned it, using this opportunity to really think about your culture and really strengthen it. And like you, Sophie, we actually looked at our culture over the last year and realized while we had an amazing culture in operation in the organization, it was a bit of a cluttered wardrobe of expectations, and we used the opportunity to really galvanize people, almost throw out all the clothes of the cluttered wardrobe on the floor, pull back in a nice organized wardrobe of exactly, let's sum up what our culture is, because we've learned even more about ourselves over the last year. And so it's like which is first, chicken or egg, but using it as a virtuous circle to reinforce the culture and to share stories and then reinforce more culture. And it has actually brought us together. Oddly, we've been very far apart, but we've really worked hard to keep together. And to my sort of chronic and acute, it's exhausting after a while, and you don't want every conversation to be digital.
Yeah.
But it has forced a lot of companies to really focus on your culture, which I think is excellent. And as you say, it will never all be the same again. You know, the rubber band stretches and you don't remain completely stretched, you go back to halfway. But I think we've all learned something about it, and it's really brought culture into absolute core.
And it probably has brought where you may, you mentioned, Sophie, you have breakfast with two people across Europe. I mean, bringing clinical teams and senior management together in a way that they never would have had access before.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can do that fast digitally, can't you? Next week we'll be doing some celebration. We've got a senior leadership team meeting. We'll be bringing in some clinics into some awards, and with the top 45, we're going to have a clinic from Lithuania, Brazil, and Hungary in the meeting. It's great, using those technologies to bring people closer together from a workforce point of view.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up on something you said, Kirsty, which was about storytelling. And we started, storytelling was the part of inception of Care Big. I think stories resonate with people. There in this room, more than PowerPoints and bar graphs can ever do that. It resonates and does something to people, and I think it builds trust and it builds brand. And those two coexist very nicely together for the success of the organization. So me having those check-in moments and those virtual coffee breaks together, it wasn't an agenda based on strict performance measures. It was about, how are you feeling? How is this affecting you this day or this week? And I think that has created even more of a caring culture. And when we started to work on Care Big, we decided to work on the culture building behaviors alongside it. So how do our leaders turn up every day? Back to basics. It's back to basic things that we as leaders need to do every day, whatever in the organization, whether the P&L is raining, whether it's sunny, whatever the weather in the organization, there are things that we as caregivers need to give and straight to our people. And I think that COVID it has been a springboard for accelerating and deepening that culture organization and giving power to people on the front line who have that purpose at the epicenter of everything they're doing. It's given them that ability that they so rightly deserved. And as you say, we should not lose that now.
I wanted to pick up on the culture, but a slightly different culture, the sort of the hero culture which has emerged, and I presume it's sort of global. It has been very sort of, very very much the centre of the focus of the UK, with key workers and nurses being declared heroes, and then the backlash that then came from that, with the way that people were sort of treating them, and it's brought people out in two different ways. It's either solidified their purpose, or it's made them run and seek a different purpose. And I'm just curious to hear, because obviously that has a huge impact on your own internal culture, your own ability to hire, retain, to look after the safety of your patient, of your employees, and ultimately then the patients. And all three of you operate in very different areas, with a lot of chronic and acute care, with care homes and nursing homes, and with the diagnostics sort of often right at the very start, at the beginning of that journey. And I mean, so Sami, how has that impacted, how has that hero culture impacted you, both positively and negatively, actually? Because it's good to talk about the negative side of this in terms of workforce.
So we actually, probably without any further motivation and thought went into it, but we started to refer to our people quite automatically as our uni heroes. I would write out to them. We have workplace, speak with them, and this gave our frontline people really that sense of purpose, and we celebrated that with them. We thanked them for it. We never lost sight of the fact that they were the heartbeat of the organization. So I think it, as I said, it really highlighted that. It also showed people's vulnerability. People feeling tired, overwhelmed, people working from home that did not have, that regenerative community around them of family and friends, feeling isolated, feeling that they'd lost a little bit the direction of travel and on what they were doing. So I think you had one population really going and really not even seeking the purpose, was actually seeking them. And I think that they were the kind of two communities that I found myself speaking with and looking after during the crisis. And I think some people also, they come back to what I would call the brass tacks of life. Is this or is this a vocation? Am I adding value where I am? Does this correspond to who I want to be? Not just what do I want to do, but who I want to be. And I saw also some of that in some of our leadership layers. And that is something that we have authentic conversations about, and we speak with people, and we try to understand what is really affecting the person. But we saw a number of people being adversely affected through fatigue and through loss of purpose connection.
And Kirsty, how about you in that sort of environment?
Yeah, so our clinical staff last year, we put a program in place and gave support to each country and said, here's an amount of money. How can you do what locally you need to do to support our staff being able to do their work and not burn out? So, for example, in Brazil, it was on-site massages. In Saudi, it was, book clubs and counseling. In Albania, it was friendship groups. There were all sorts of things. In Spain, it was, extra support for nursery vouchers and care vouchers, etc. So, care and childcare. So we put that in place, but that has moved into a well-being strategy, actually. And this year, we've spent a lot of time on the mental well-being side. We surveyed the whole company in the summer. We were sort of positively surprised that people were still holding up. But what I think you're starting to see now is people making the choices of, we actually sort of got through it. We got through it, and people are either, two camps. They're either saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I actually need to go and do something completely different. And that can be clinical staff or management staff. And we're also seeing other people going, I'm joining this company because it's got a purpose. And we've got some, on the management side, that's great because people can arrive immediately. On the clinical side, actually, there's a time lag because people want to get into the sector, but you need to get trained. So it doesn't help the workforce potential shortages, but there are positives and negatives. People burnt out and taking a decision not to be here, and other people saying, actually, this is where I want to be. And we've seen some people come from all sorts of industries into the management functions as well. I mean, I came from the oil industry.
Sure.
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 It's quite different.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think I wanted to touch upon something you mentioned in the introduction, something we actually spoke about in December last year about you were struggling with the issue about, well, how am I going to approach, making sure all my clinical staff are vaccinated, which I know it is probably something, Sophie, that in your UK businesses at the moment, I'm keen to hear. Kirsty, you told us, is it 95% of?
We're up at over 90% on staff and over 72% on patients worldwide, which is, of course, we can't control. We can't control. We can influence and support and ensure it's executed as fast as possible. Yeah.
Sure. And Sophie, what are how has that been impacting you in particular? What are your what's your journey with vaccinations, and talk about mandatory vaccinations? What are your what's your story?
I mean, it's of course a key dimension to prevent from further pandemic wave. Currently, we are at 97% across Europe of vaccinated employees, at least with the first intake. So the second will come for some of them in the days to come. So it's a very high level. We've been of course quite helped by the mandatory vaccination regulation in France and in Italy. Actually, it started with Italy, then UK decided to go, and France. And so I'm very, very glad to see the result. Of course, it was not easy for some of our employees. We had to ask really a very limited number, less than 100 employees, to stop working because for the time being they don't have done the first intake. But all in all, it's a great comfort to know that everyone is safe, let's say, and should not convey any virus further. To come back to the previous question, what was the impact in terms of mental health of employee and burnout in the company? I would say quite the same as Kirsty described. We of course provide a lot of support and financial support to countries so that they could put in place the relevant action plan to support their employee in the various homes and clinics. What we discovered is actually that, you know, all the listening program from external psychologists or whatever are not necessarily what people want to have. They really want to be able to discuss in the team with the relevant support, of course, but it's really very much what happens locally that help people to get through. And as you just said, Kirsty, some people decided that they had made it, but it was enough, and they would like to change. This happened. But I would say we have also been able to attract new profiles to the company because of the purpose, because actually people discovered what it means actually to be a care, to what care jobs, healthcare jobs means, and so people were attracted to this type of career path. And this has actually accelerated the internal qualification and training path that we have currently. So we have a target of having 10% of our staff being engaged in such qualifying paths. So for young people and also for people that want to develop and get to a higher qualification. And I would say it has given a strong push to that program across Europe. Maybe one last topic I would like to tackle and share with my colleagues, co-panelists. It's actually, for the time being, I have really the feeling, in at least in the European labor markets, that the vaccination centers have significantly destabilized, jeopardized the labor market. We see a lot of nurses or physicians that actually decide to go for a self-employed or a short-term position into vaccination centers. So they work, let's say, 2-3 days, and then they say then they go on holiday, and then are not available anymore. So I think short-term, this is a major disruption. So I hope that this vaccination campaign is now over and that we can have these people back into normal care, because otherwise staff scarcity is a huge issue anyway. But if the qualified people are a kind of attract into, you know, short-term engagement and only perform vaccination and then go on holiday, then it's going to be very difficult. But I hope it's not only a short-term disruption. I don't know, what is your experience on that?
You don't need another competitor for people, do you? You don't need any other competitors entering the market.
Really don't.
And Sammy, do you have any comments just on that aspect? Has that impacted in you in particular on vaccination centres? Are you seeing that across your market?
In France, yes, for sure. We have similar issues, I think, in terms of attracting people. And I think people are going for also shorter term and shorter term projects. And we've seen a move towards that. For us, it's always going to be also a challenge with our pathologists and our radiologists. Over 65% of them are aged 55 and over. So it's, for us, the skills gap is also between those going into retirement, those mentors, and those coming out of university. And that is also for us a really critical skills gap that we have to adapt to, and are using clearly digitalization to work through. So that is on top of nurses and on top of what we've seen with vaccination centers for COVID.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask anybody in the room, give you the opportunity to, if anybody has a question that they'd like to add. I see a hand up. I'll repeat it in the. If you say it, I can hear you. I'll repeat it.
Okay.
There we go.
It's a twofold question, actually, regarding
Need a
the
pen.
topic of culture. You all described the core values that you have in your company, particularly Sophie in the Korean group. And my question is basically, you define that from the top, but how do you manage I can imagine it's a top-down process in the beginning, and then there will be bottom-up movements. And how do you integrate that in the culture that you have in your company? That's so to say the first question. Second question, you talked about people quitting a job, particularly during the pandemic, and looking exhausted, looking for something different. I used to work in the care industry as well, and my impression was that most people, they don't quit the job, but they quit the direct boss they have because they're not happy with the management, with the direct management. So, what's your experience on that?
Thank you. You all heard those two-part questions, right? So was that directed to anybody in particular? You mentioned Sophie, perhaps to start, or?
That would be great, but I would like to hear it from all of you.
Yeah, we'll put that all through. Sophie, we'll go to you first.
Okay, so culture and top-down process. Actually, it has been a top-down and bottom-up process on both sides. So, of course, it's a leadership decision to decide about the company's core values, but we made it very interactive, having some mirror group of facility managers, of nurses, of caregivers, of the various professions, discussing across the board about their perception and their also what they sense, that what they feel as being core values. That was the first. It has been a 1-year process, actually. So we decided about the 3 core values, and then we decided to work about attitudes, behaviors, what it means in the daily life everywhere across the networks, what it means when you are a caregiver in a French nursing home, what it means if you are working in a mental health clinic in Spain, and so actually I came out of this with a very, very I would say a telling book of behaviors based on anecdotes and situations, the daily situation one would face in a facility. And this material is really a great one, has been drafted, reworked, translated into the various languages, and has been also translated into games. So that actually, and now we are on tour, and this is the In Caring Hands, so-called In Caring Hands, which is our signature tour. And in each and every facility, and this is really the local management that do that, there are games and discussion on the values and the behaviors associated with that. And it helps to tackle actually the question of how to really tackle the difficult care situation, how to get on with families, how to be transparent about difficult situation, how to report about things that went not so well, how also to deal with colleagues. So I think it's a huge opportunity actually to open hearts and open discussion and make sure people really feel free to discuss and to understand what is at stake. And this is really a huge, I would say, a huge bond dimension across the company. So that's for the way we work on the value and the culture of the company. On the people quitting, actually, what happened in the last 12 months is very special, I would say. So there has been people, care nurses, managers, that especially after the first or the second wave in Germany, had to face very, very difficult situation, and they were exhausted, and they said, I need a rest, or I want to do something else, or in a different environment. So it's not about difficult leadership locally. This is of course part of the industry and the segment, that's for sure. But what happened with the COVID is very specific. So and again, those people, I would say, retiring or jumping out of the segment. This is not so important. If I look at the fluctuancy, so turnover rate, at least in Korian, it has been actually down in 2020, and it's decreasing in 2021. And the average duration, so the tenure duration, so is growing. So it means that actually there are more people that are actually more engaged, more committed because of or despite the crisis than people that cannot stand it anymore and wants to leave. But you're right. Local management in care activities is, of course, is what makes the difference. It's such a core pillar of a company.
Yeah. Kirsty, perhaps you can take on those two.
Yeah, in terms of culture, what would I say? There's some basic ingredients. As Sophie says, it's not just top down. It's never just top down. It's never a thing. You have to get what your culture is really, 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 really simple, and don't change the message. That sounds basic, but it's essential that everybody can understand what it is, how to sum it up, remember it, etc. The second one is your leaders have to, when I say role model, that's not the right term because nobody's perfect, but they have to show that it matters, talk about it, repeat it, listen for it, and make it important. You really do need to ensure that whatever your words are and how you're saying you want to show up, it's woven through your processes, the processes that touch everybody. Performance management, interview questions, onboarding, the things that are the same for everybody. They're ideal places to put it in. And then storytell to bring it to life from wherever around the organization. A couple of other ingredients, go virally engage people who want to get involved around the organization. People love to belong. They love to feel special. They love to get involved beyond their daily job, particularly if they're purpose-led. Never try to measure the behavior's outcome. Measure what you're trying to put in. Measure, are the words the same? Measure, are we putting it into the processes? So measure the leading indicators, not the lagging indicators, and do it on repeat for a long time. Think of it like you're making it a core part of your operations. And those, no matter where you are in what organization, those sort of are the basic ingredients. And support your frontline staff. As Sophie said, and Sami said, the situations where they can bring it to life, listen for them, help people be equipped for them, make it fun. Don't make it technical. But there are, and as I say, it's never done and it's never precisely measured because it will always evolve because people come in and out of the organization. But this is change, not a communications exercise. It's change, it's people's new habits, it's people's new behaviors, and it takes repeat. It's a bit like you can say you're going on a diet and you can do it for 3 weeks, but once you stop and you don't change any habits and you keep drinking blue milk instead of red milk, you're back to where you were. You've got to be committed to drink red milk forever. It's a new habit. You can tell I've done that because that's how I think about it.
Or no.
I only drink red milk
Yeah.
now. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Kirsty. I mean, Sami, same to you. Do you share the sort of the same opinions, or?
Yeah, I mean, for our culture creation, we had a top-down, bottom-up, and side-to-side approach. Our management team were working on the mission, motto, and mantra. So, the motto being our promise to our customer, the mantra being the one thing you call anybody from the organization up in the middle of the night. Well, I wouldn't encourage it, but if you had to, and you ask them about our mantra, they should automatically resonate with Care Big. And that was the start, the inception. And how do we bring Care Big to life? And then we went out, spoke with all sorts of people across the organizations from all different functions, from all different backgrounds, and asked them how they felt we could bring Care Big to life. And it very quickly became about storytelling. That's the best fuel for your culture. Make it about who and what you already represent, because then you can encapsulate that into something that is meaningful, that people can see already within the organization and give a name to it. And for us, that was Care Big. And beyond that, our culture building behaviors, and that they were designed by our people for our people, for how they wanted to show up into the organization and how they wanted leaders to show up in the organization. So when we went back to the management team with, we're not coming back with values, we're coming back with culture building behaviors. There's not 10 of them, there's 4 of them. And this is how we want to really bring them to life across our training programs, across the entire life cycle of how people are in the organization. So what does it mean for somebody coming for an interview with us or a discussion about an acquisition with us? What does it mean when we look at managing performance and purpose? What does it mean for somebody who's going to change roles in the organization or is in difficulty in the organization? It has to bring meaning through the entire life cycle. So for us, it was going in all directions and very much sponsored by the leadership team. I would not say created by the leadership team. And that was really the essence of its power. We measure engagement across the organization in a very detailed, very granular way. And during COVID, I think that Sophie also alluded to it, we had our best engagement rate and our lowest turnover rates. So clearly people were staying with the organization because of that culture, because of that purpose. And then on your second question about people quit their manager, I think that is true. If I say in my own experience, I think it was truer or more prominent before COVID. The reasons I've seen people leave during COVID are quite different. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not citing their manager or their leader, but they can also cite other reasons about work-life balance, about family time, about spending time with other people in their lives. The whole notion of prioritization, I think, has changed for many people. And I see a more flavored and a more variability in the reasons why people will choose to leave the organization. It's no longer just about the leader and the manager. Now, that is not to say that our leaders and our managers are not critical in retaining people, that they're not critical in motivating people. That doesn't go away.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead, Cassie.
One thing just on that, it's and to build on what you've both said, I think I'm observing leadership populations more comfortable with talking about their style and how they engage people and being more of the sort of emotional quotient conversation. It's more acceptable. It's part of what we do. People just much more open to it. Actually, as an executive team, we've just done sort of profile, it's called Insights, it's profiles of styles, and I was expecting huge pushback from the team of, I'm not doing that, why am I talking? And everybody's done it. Everybody's done it, and we're going to be talking about it next Monday.
What about their own personal management styles?
It's styles of natural energies and how people naturally interact, collaborate. And I think if one good thing to have come out of this is I would hope that management leadership generally is much more accepting that how you show up is a real leading indicator to how you can motivate, engage, empower, and support your teams and get the best out of them as well. And that's a really core part of leadership, I think.
No, that's
absolutely. We do a similar exercise. We have done for the last 4 years with the top 200, 250 people in the organization. They complete the styles questionnaire. It can dovetail into a cultural questionnaire about how teams interact and collaborate, and I couldn't agree more. I think it is so important to understand how you show up as a leader and how you're, on the contrary to what we learn in leadership school about how your self-style and how others perceive you, they should be similar. In fact, they are really very similar. How you feel and think about showing up and how you actually show up in the organization can be somewhat quite different. And you tap into something really quite magical when you understand what those differences are. So I think any organization, it's really important. And I think it's great that you have this openness from the leaders to do that, to do those styles and to embrace everything that is great about them and everything that's perhaps not so great and that can warrant some more work and some reach out and signal into colleagues to help.
Self-awareness is a very good and important thing for anybody.
If sometimes uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. It's a difficult thing.
Oh yes, it can hurt a little bit.
Exactly. Well, that brings us perfectly to the end of time. You had a question, but perhaps we don't have time for it, but perhaps you could grab Kirsty, or I'm going to volunteer both Sammy and Sophie. I haven't warned them about this, but you can send them your questions through the app or send them an email, and you'd be happy to chat. I know both of you will, and Kirsty as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.